Hello again. This is State Senator Harriet Chandler of the 1st Worcester District, and this is Beacon Hill Chat, the program that brings interesting people in to talk about interesting subjects. Last week we had a unique program. We had Suzanne Lewandowski with us, who is who has survived and recovered from a severe eating disorder. And she very bravely told her story of how she became ill and how she sought to recover. And this week we're going to continue that story, not with Suzanne, but with people who are trained professionals who deal with eating disorders. We're interested in determining whether there is many others of you out there who are concerned about this subject, and I think there are. So I think you're going to find today's program exceedingly enlightening. We are very grateful to be joined today by two very special professionals, Krystin Tyman, who is the Executive Director of Multi-Service Eating Disorders Association, MEDA as it's called. We welcome you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Stuart Koman, a Ph.D. who serves as the President and the CEO of Walden Behavioral Care, which is a full-service eating disorder facility. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's located, based in Waltham. But these are two professionals who can take Suzanne's story and the story of many of you out there to the next level. So let's start with you, Krystin, and tell us how you got involved in this. You have a master's in public health.
I do.
And how did you focus on eating disorders?
So I was the sibling of a person who struggled with an eating disorder. First heard the word eating disorder when I was 12 years old, and by the time I got into high school, made it sort of my mission in life to make sure no other sibling would ever have to watch a sister or brother struggle with an eating disorder. Got into college. The transition to college was difficult, and I saw some things about myself, disordered eating patterns, overexercise patterns, and realized I needed to reach out for help. I needed to do more, and joined a peer education group right here at a college in Worcester.
Really?
Yes, at Holy Cross, and that really...
So you're a Holy Cross alum?
I am a Holy Cross alum, very proud Crusader. That really cemented for me.
But they had a program.
They had a program. It was the Need Peer Educators, Nutrition, Exercise, and Eating Disorders, facilitated by a counselor on staff, and sort of helped other collegiates learn how to get people to the appropriate person for care if they were struggling, what to say, what not to say, symptoms, behaviors to observe and to report. So I joined that group my sophomore year, and by the time I was graduating, MEDA had come out to speak, and they were looking for a staff person, and it just all fell into place, and has sort of, for almost 8 years.
You've been with them for 8 years?
Almost 8 years this spring. It's fulfilled everything I wanted to do when I was a 12, 13-year-old girl about ending this issue.
Tell us about the eating disorder that you observed when you were 12 or 13 years old with your sibling.
So my older sibling definitely was in high school and just struggling with fitting in. She was someone who was restricting her diet, over-exercising, and it was, what we observed as siblings was she wasn't as fun. She was isolating. She seemed sad a lot. And that more for us was a clue that something was wrong than necessarily the behaviors, because she was able to hide the behaviors, but the personality difference, depression seeping in, that's what sort of we saw as sisters and brothers, and didn't want to see it anymore and wanted to help her.
And did you major in psychology in college?
I didn't. I majored in history because I had always loved history, but took some psychology, sociology classes, and definitely everything I did in history had a slant towards women's history and sort of looking at gender within the context of how it affects, a lot of times, how people feel in their bodies.
So what does MEDA do?
So MEDA is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1994 by a woman who herself had struggled with an eating disorder and didn't feel like there was a a place to turn to just get basic answers. Where do I go for help? Who can I talk to? Who knows about eating disorders and is appropriate to treat eating disorders? So we take a three-pronged approach to care. We have 3 branches. So Connect to Recovery, that's helping people who are currently struggling, who might never have reached out before, call and get an assessment, a 1-hour face-to-face meeting with a clinician who will let them know what they're struggling with and then make recommendations and referrals. We run support groups through this program as well. Another branch is the Connect to Confidence branch, and that's our educational program. So we're out in the schools, colleges, universities in Massachusetts, and sometimes as far north as New York State and down into Connecticut and Rhode Island, just to go into classrooms, share personal perspectives, what it was like to have an eating disorder.
Do you do this in Central Mass?
We have been out in Central Mass area. Schools, colleges contact us. It's, everything at MEDA is affordable. We want people to be able to use our services. So
Insurance pays for this?
We don't accept insurance at MEDA, so a one-time assessment is $80, groups are $20 a week. And then if people need further care, need to be connected to providers, therapists, nutritionists, or a program like Walden itself, we figure out their insurance and we connect them to people who take their insurance to sort of help that piece, which we know can be very frustrating for people.
And the third branch?
The third branch is Connect to Growth, and that's our professional development branch. And that is just, we want people to know how to treat eating disorders appropriately, because we know the earlier someone reaches out for help and the better care they receive by people in the field who understand this very complicated illness, the more likely their recovery will start and happen sooner. So we run a national conference. We're constantly having therapists, nutritionists. We have 6 peer supervision groups so people can learn from one another. And we're just finding ways to educate the front line.
Something I didn't ask last to Suzanne, and I should. How common are eating disorders?
They are very common. I think there are some statistics out there that say it's 10 million women struggle and 1 to 2 million men. And there's another stat that I think is more accurate, which is 1 in 12 people in the United States struggles with some type of eating disorder, whether that's anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder, or this category we call in the field EDNOS, eating disorder not otherwise specified, which are sort of your subclinical eating disorders. I think it's an appropriate statistic that 1 in 12 people are struggling.
Now, it used to be that it was just adolescent girls. Mm-hmm. Is that still true?
I think that's always been the myth that's out there. And with media, we sort of see this idea that it's anorexia nervosa is the most common eating disorder, and it's this young, wealthy, white adolescent, but it's not true at all. The research is showing that eating disorders are prevalent throughout all types of ethnicities, socioeconomic status. Recent research, there's been a spike of by 119% in hospitalizations for children under the age of 12.
Under the age of 12?
Under the age of 12 for eating disorders. And older women is a new subgroup that we're seeing and needing to create specialized programs for.
Why older women?
People are susceptible to an eating disorder any time in their life, anytime there's transition, anytime there's a life episode where the coping skills you've had just aren't enough, aren't working. So I think, the myth was it only happened in adolescence, but the reality is it can happen at any time for any one of us if we're not watching over ourselves, getting the appropriate care when we notice these symptoms creeping up.
So let's turn to you, Dr. Koman. You have been in this field for a while. How long have you been specializing in?
Specializing in eating disorders for almost the past 9 years.
And how did it begin? How did your interest begin? You're a trained psychologist?
Yeah, my interest in psychology goes back, to reading lots of biographies as a kid. But my particular clinical background is in working with kids, adolescents, and families. So I had a natural interest in this field, and in particular in eating disorders anyway. But the truth is, until I came to Walden, until we started Walden, and essentially we inherited a small program that was part of a hospital that that went under that in 2003. It wasn't my specialty focus. So I'm a relative newcomer compared to people like Krystin and certainly Susan, who was on the show last week.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get involved?
Well, as I was saying, there was a small program that was actually the only program of its kind in Massachusetts, serving individuals with eating disorders that we assumed control of. We were asked to come in when the hospital was going under. The Department of Mental Health was very interested in saving these programs because they were good programs. And it was something that I had done before. So in
saving a program?
Saving these hospital-based programs. But I'll tell you, my real passion for it has evolved, and evolved pretty quickly, more from my connection to it as a parent, really.
Okay.
And really in seeing the parents bringing their kids or the families bringing their loved ones to our clinic, and seeing really the exhaustion and the confusion, the devastation that everybody was experiencing, and you know, just coming at it from a parent point of view, I just could connect with it very strongly from that point of view. These were very loving parents and are very loving parents who were looking for answers and finding very few. Lots of conflicting information. Or lack of information, and also, you know, for many years troubled by the lack of insurance coverage for these disorders. That has improved somewhat,
but not really.
Well,
not enough.
It has improved, but I would say we as a society still haven't come to grips with the enormity of this problem.
You know, I was made aware of this originally about 8 years ago when a constituent of mine called, someone I had known them well, used to be neighbors, and great concern because her younger daughter had a eating disorder, and she was by this point desperate. She didn't know where to turn. There were no programs in Worcester or Worcester County. The child had been hospitalized a couple of times, and she was at her wit's end. So the story you're telling is exactly the story that I saw. They finally put her in as an inpatient at McLean, which was difficult. McLean is a mental health facility, mm-hmm. and it was a very difficult time for them. So that to find that there are not only opportunities here that we can turn to, and resources, but there are really opportunities and resources right here in Worcester that we can turn to is a wonderful thing.